Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my July 2022 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with the nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you want to skip the charts, you can go down below to figure out how to do that. If you want to go back to something I've talked about previously, you can do that. You can skip forward if you think I'm going to spoil something. I try not to put in spoilers, but if you don't want to know anything, now you know how to skip a section. If you aren't already subscribed to my channel, please do that and hit the bell icon so you might actually know when I upload things. In June, I read 15 books for a total of 4,867 pages. This takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so about 2,247 of those pages were actually about 70 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 12 adult books and 3 YA books. I read 12 novels, 2 graphic novels, and 1 novella. This month, nearly half of what I read was non-fiction, followed by fantasy, mystery thriller, historical fiction, and contemporary. If you adjust by page count, not a lot changes. 13 of these books were from the library, but I also read one I already owned and one from an author. I read 7 audiobooks, 4 paperbacks, 3 hardcovers, and 1 ebook. The biggest chunk of my books were in the 300 to 399 page range, and everything was published in the last 12 years. The majority of these books were written by female authors, and the protagonists were mostly female as well. In terms of setting, 7 were set in the US, 4 in the UK, 2 in other worlds, 1 in Canada, and 1 in Qatar. In terms of diversity of subject matter, a big chunk were queer, feminists had to do with race, mental health, or disability, but there were some without any notable diversity. In terms of star rating, this month I had 2 3.5 star reads, 7 4-star reads, 3 4.5 star reads, and 3 5-star reads. Let's start with the lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? It's always a little bit of a weird month when my lowest rated read is a 3.5 star, mostly because at the end of the year when I talk about my best and worst books, I usually just pick the first book on my list and the last book on my list on all of my monthly wrap-ups. So a 3.5 star book, not the worst, but if you only read good stuff, I guess it's the worst. I always feel like I need to put that disclaimer in there because I actually really enjoyed this book and it's not the worst, but it just happens to be the worst this month. That book is Broken Places and Outer Spaces by Nnedi Okorafor. This is also the novella that I read this month. The audiobook was about 2 hours long. This is a memoir of sorts by Nnedi Okorafor, and it talks about her time growing up, having some health issues, going to get those corrected, and having a surgery that actually ended up with her being paralyzed, and her going on from there to discover sci-fi and to really want to start writing. There's a little bit more than that goes into it, but not much more. And what I found from this book is I really wanted more of it. However, this is done by the TED Talk people who take big ideas and put them into very small books apparently, so it's not its fault that it's not the length that I wanted it to be, but I still wanted more. My other 3.5 star book this month was Innocence on Trial: The Framing of Ivan Henry. This is a book about a true crime case where there was a series of break-ins and assaults in Vancouver in the 1980s, and all of them were pinned on this one guy named Ivan Henry, who definitely didn't do them. Spoiler alert, but he didn't get out of jail for these crimes he didn't commit until 27 years later. You know when you watch crime shows and the defendant is like, nobody understands me, I'm going to represent myself, and you're like, that's a bad idea? That happened in this case. Essentially, Ivan Henry came up with all of this information as to why he possibly couldn't have been the perpetrator, and then also information about other things, and his lawyers just wouldn't really listen to him, and because he didn't feel like he was being listened to, he decided to represent himself, and not knowing the rules of evidence, that didn't go very well. Obviously, as you know, he went to jail. This was also fascinating because it was also a case of the Crown is supposed to try to win, obviously, but if they find evidence that doesn't point to a certain suspect, you're not supposed to ignore that evidence and continue going towards that suspect. That's not how it works. However, that's definitely how it worked in this case. I've been on a real true crime kick, as you will see from other books on this list, and this is just something I found at my library, and I picked it up because it's pretty local to where I live. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being The Keeper by Jessica Moore. This is a book that takes place in the UK, and you've got 2 different timelines, the present and the past. In the past timeline, you start out with this woman who's on a night out with friends and she meets a guy at a bar, and it goes from there. In the present timeline, a woman has turned up dead and they're trying to figure out if it was by her own hand or if there was foul play involved. One of the biggest things to note is the cops in this case aren't exactly the most PC, and a lot of their internal monologues and opinions were really annoying. Especially because the woman that turns up dead worked in a house for women who are running away from abusive situations, and they have some opinions about the woman who runs it and the women that are there and whether or not they should just suck it up and go back to their husbands. This book, however, had a truly wonderful twist that I did not see coming, so I very much appreciated that. Next, we have a graphic novel, and that's Welcome to St. Hell, My Trans Teen Misadventure. This is a memoir of sorts about a trans man talking to his previous teenage self about how it's going to get so much better after high school, but what he went through as a teenager that was super uncomfortable because he hadn't come out as being trans. I thought this was a really fun way for this artist to tell his own story. However, there are definitely trigger warnings, especially for trans folk, about misgendering. He also dead names himself. There's a lot of panels that show certain body parts that might be triggering as well, so just know that going in. I thought this graphic novel was honest and open about the experience, and I liked at points where it actually broke the fourth wall and characters such as his parents would talk directly to the audience instead of to each other in the scene, and I thought that was really cool. Next we have It Will End Like This. This is a YA retelling of sorts of the Lizzie Borden case set in a contemporary setting. In this case we have two teenagers, one 16 and one 17. They're sisters and we get both of their perspectives. And at the very beginning of the book, they lose their mother, and then we flash forward about 4 months later, and things have just really gone downhill. They obviously very much miss their mother, and things at home aren't great because not only does their dad not really seem to care, he is also dating her personal assistant who is significantly younger than him. She was basically like a slightly older sister to the teens, and now she's trying to be their stepmother, and they are not buying it. When some evidence comes to light that the father and the potential stepmother might have had something to do with their mother's death, they start investigating. I found this one fun and fast-paced, and I really wanted to know what happened, and I really wanted these characters to be able to get through it okay. And I'm not going to let you know if that happened or not, because that's how I roll in these. I just tell you enough to make you want to read it yourself. Next we have A Prophecy in Ash by Julie Xantopoulos. This was an advanced reader copy, and this book doesn't come out until October, and it's the second in the In Ash series. The first in this series is A Curse in Ash, and I very much enjoyed that, so when I had the chance to get an advanced reader copy, I jumped on it. Obviously, I can't tell you too much about this one without spoiling things from the first book. So in the first book, you start out following three main characters. One is Ashlyn, one is Reardon, and one is Brynoch. Although I believe in the first book you only get the perspectives of those first two characters. Ashlyn lives in our world. She is a witch, but sometimes she goes to fairy because her dad lives there. And in this world there's something called Ravdies, which are basically companions to witches that are fated. If you happen to meet that person, you know instantly that that is your connection. And Ravdies work to help focus witches' powers. Reardon is from Ireland, and he is escaping there because of the tragic death of his parents. He's basically just trying to get away, and he ends up in the same town as Ashlyn, and when they meet each other, you can guess what happens. However, he wants nothing to do with magic because that had a big hand in his parents dying. The more astute of you will remember that I mentioned a third character named Brynoch. He is a big hulking fae, and also, yes, is kind of in love with Ashlyn. But instead of this having a love triangle in it, this is more of a polyamory situation. This second book in the series definitely ramps up the steaminess. There's a lot more things that happen between these characters. And then obviously the plot is continued and ramped up, and now I just need the third book to come out. You can currently pre-order this book, and I think the first book is actually on special as well. So if you haven't read the first one, you can get that for a discount and pre-order this one to read in October. Next we have The Cartographers. This is a book that I finished last week, and it was very imaginative and I very much enjoyed it. It's about this woman named Nell who studied to be a cartographer because her dad was a cartographer and she fell in love with the subject. However, about 7 years previously, they had a very big fight, and he not only kicked her out of her position at the New York Public Library where they both worked, but basically out of the field entirely. He has so much sway in the field that nobody would hire her. An event brings her back to the library after all of these years, and she finds this map and has to unravel the secrets around it. This audiobook was great not only because I wanted to know the secrets and I wanted to know what was going on, and it had some cartography lore that I was actually familiar with because it's kind of a popular secret, but then it was also a full cast audiobook because occasionally she would meet these people from her parents' pasts and they would give her little bits of the story, and each of those characters would have their own voice actor, and I Always appreciate that. This had kind of a dark academic vibe because in the flashbacks there are characters who are actually going to school for cartography. So it has that kind of friend group in academics kind of vibe to it. And then obviously trying to figure out what the heck is going on with this map was a lot of fun. Next we have No Time Like the Future by Michael J. Fox. This is one of what I gather is many of his memoirs. In this one, he tells a lot of stories before and mostly after his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease and tells us how that has shaped his life. He was obviously a working actor when he got the diagnosis, and then he tried to continue on with certain roles without telling the public at large about his diagnosis. And then it got to the point where he actually retired and he said that the only person I can play is somebody with Parkinson's, which actually led to him coming back and playing various characters that didn't necessarily have Parkinson's, but had a different health condition. And then he used the tics of his Parkinson's to actually play that character. And I found that so fascinating. That's such an actor thing to do. And I just really liked hearing him tell me these stories about his life. There were also personal family stories, such as certain times where he's surprised his mother by just showing up at her door, whether that be here in British Columbia or when she's on vacation somewhere in Europe, and he just shows up as the person delivering their breakfast in the morning. This was fun and it was really great to hear it narrated by him. My next book is not only another nonfiction, it's another true crime nonfiction, and that's My Friend Anna. If you've seen the Netflix show Inventing Anna, this is about the same case. However, this is written from the perspective of one of Anna's friends, and after reading the book and seeing the show, I am definitely on Team Rachel. The show makes you really want to think that you should be on Anna's side, but I don't think that's the correct side to be on. I didn't hear about this case when it was going on, but essentially it's about this woman named Anna Delvey who was pretending to be a rich German heiress, and she was splashing cash all over New York. She made some friends, and eventually one time she decided that since her visa is running out and she has to leave the country and come back, and that's just how it worked, she was going to go to Morocco, and she decided she was going to take her friend and a couple of other people because she wanted to go on this adventure and she wanted to take people with her, and she could definitely afford to do that. Spoiler alert, no she couldn't. So she ended up just being very flighty about booking things and all that type of stuff, and Rachel ended up booking stuff knowing that Anna was going to pay her back because she is super rich and she said that she was going to pay her back. However, there were a series of events where it just turned out that she kept asking and kept not getting paid back. There's a lot more to this case than that, but that is one of the very central things about the case. And the fact that it took a really long time for anyone to really care about Rachel's case and how this was actually affecting her life. I thought this was really well written. I think that the show did Rachel dirty, and this book was also narrated by the author as well. On to my 4.5 star books, the first one being another graphic novel, and that's Beetle and the Hollow Bones. This one is about a main character named Beetle who is studying magic with her grandmother. However, it's not really the type of magic she really wants to learn. However, it is the type of magic that her type of people tend to learn, so she's kind of stuck doing that. However, she had this childhood friend who's off learning the type of magic she wants to learn, and when that friend comes back into town, they reconnect and she wants to learn that type of magic even more. She also has this other friend that's referred to as Blob Ghost, and it's this ghost that's literally stuck as a ghost at the local mall, and it's just this little adorable blob, and they have the cutest relationship. That means a lot of this plot is taken up with trying to figure out how to get Blob Ghost away from just being able to haunt at the mall so they can leave and do other things in their afterlife. I really liked the art in this one. It was fun, it was nerdy at points because characters started discussing their own fan fictions and that type of thing, and it was just a good witchy time. I find myself really looking for witchy books recently, especially because I think I'm going to want to read a lot of them come October, so if you have any witchy reads you want to recommend, please let me know down in the comments below. Next we have Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This is the first in a series, and this one was feminist as heck. And also based on actual events, which I didn't learn until the end and was also super interesting. Our main character is basically an old maid who's been living with a cousin and raising his kids for him, but she wants to go away to university because the university is finally taking women, and she basically has to pay him to be able to do that. And he says that if she does anything to besmirch the family name, he will no longer support her and that type of thing. However, to be able to accept a scholarship to go to the school, she has to go to this feminist club that wants to get certain issues into the public's eye, such as there's this whole thing where when a woman marries a man, he gets all of her property, and these women don't want that to be a thing, so they are trying to make it sure that everybody knows about this so that it can be voted against. On the other side of this, we have a duke who is just trying to get his family home back because because his father, the Duke previous to him, actually lost it gambling, and he's just trying to put together the family name and try to do these things and trying to get his little brother to not be a little shit. And obviously from here, many shenanigans ensue when these two meet, clash, and then eventually fall in love. I feel like I've said this a lot in this video, but this one was a lot of fun, and since it's the first in a series, I actually have a hold from the library for the second one, and I hope to read that very soon. My next book is another nonfiction book that has a very long title, so I'm going to read some of it for you. The first part of the title is If You Tell, a true story of murder, family secrets, and an unbreakable bond of sisterhood by Gregg Olsen. This is a book about the crimes of America's worst mother. And Gregg Olsen actually sat down with her 3 children and got all of this backstory of what it was like to grow up with this woman who tortured them day in and day out, and whose actions actually led to the deaths of 3 people. But nobody knew that for many, many years until these sisters actually turned in their mother. This is a case that I had heard of before, and then I knew there was a book about it, so I got the book, and then one of the channels that I watch, actually the day after I started reading the book, put out a 90-minute video about this case. So I was like, okay, I gotta finish reading the book, and then I'll come back and I'll see how they compare. Shelley Notek, the villain of this case, had a weird upbringing. Her mother died when she was very young. She was raised in part by one of her grandmothers who was not a very nice person, and then raised in part by a stepmother that she would tell every single day she hated. She was also one of those people that always has to get her way to some ridiculous extents, and she is not above just lying to people and telling some hideous, horrendous, life-changing lies just on a whim because she thinks it would be fun. Through this book you learn about her marriages to 3 different men, the 3 different children she had, the friends that she invited into her home and then eventually ended up torturing for years before they passed away. This is an absolutely brutal case, but if you're into true crime and you're fascinated by people that are just super evil, this is an interesting book to pick up. It is super well written. Additionally, this woman is up for parole this year, which is fun. I hope she doesn't get it. But then I think she actually only has a couple more years left on her sentence anyway, so either way, this woman is going to be back in the public pretty soon. On to my 5-star reads. Something I like to let you know ahead of time is that when I reread something that's a 5-star read, it automatically goes into the first slot of my 5-star reads, so that something I read for the first time that month gets the chance to be my favorite thing of the month. Because I gave you that disclaimer, you know that the first book I'm going to talk about is a reread. This is actually probably the 4th time I read this book, and that's Me and White Supremacy by Layla F. Saad. This is exactly what it says on the tin. It's about white supremacy and knowing more about that information. There's actually 28 different chapters in this book that talk about different subjects to do with white supremacy, and then there's journaling prompts at the end of all of them so you can think about how you have perpetuated it, what you can do to change it. And basically I reread this on a yearly basis so I can remember to keep up anti-racist work, because it's not just good enough to not be actively racist, you have to be actively anti-racist. I read other books on this subject, but I like to do a yearly reread of this one because it is written in such a way that it is very easy to digest over the month. Obviously, there are challenges to it. You have to challenge yourself as to how you are perpetuating the system and the privilege that you have, but you can do that in little bite-sized pieces over the month, which is how I like to read it. The last 2 books on this list, I really waffled back and forth as to which one would go first and which one would go second, and honestly, they could go either way, but I just have to talk about one of them first. So penultimately, I would like to talk about A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. I've loved everything I've read by this author, quite frankly, and I'm looking forward to reading more. This is the beginning of a historical fiction series where this woman went away to war with her best friend, and when she was presumed lost at war, she actually ended up transitioning, going back to her family home as a woman and working as a companion for her brother's wife. Through the grapevine, she and her sister-in-law find out that her best friend is not doing well, which means that his younger sister is also not doing well. And while he was at war, the younger sister was actually staying with this family, so this family is invested in how she's doing. So it's decided that the lady of the house and her companion are going to go visit and see if they can sort things out. Not only is this Duke dealing with the fact that he came back from the war with a disability, he is also very much grieving his best friend, and this becomes a little bit tricky when his best friend is right there, but but in a form that he does not recognize. This book is trans and queer and feminist and sex positive and just so lovely. There's so many just interconnected little things that have to come into play when you're talking about a class structure like this, and I really liked seeing this both in this book and in Bringing Down the Duke. It was just fascinating because you just can't do certain things because certain things aren't done. And sure, it's all well and good for people now to be like, whatever, who cares what society thinks, but society had much more of a say, I feel like, on this time frame than it does now. It still has a big say. There's obviously still things in our society that are big no-nos or whatever, but for these types of situations, I feel like society has less of a say, if that makes any sense. My other 5-star read for this month is another queer book that I thought was just lovely, and that is Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. This is a book about a woman who is recently divorced and has quit her job in order to go on to a cooking competition show. When she's there, she meets this very attractive other human who is also a little bit grumpy when they first meet. We come to find out that this other person is grumpy in part because this is the first time they are meeting her because she didn't go to the big meet and greet dinner, and now they also have to come out to her personally about the fact that they're non-binary and they use they/them pronouns. They wanted to just get it over and done with just once and not to have to do it several times over the course of filming this. And although most people at that dinner were fine, there was one contestant who was kind of an asshole about it. Competition and romance ensue, and I just very much enjoyed this. As you might know about me, if I have access to cable, I turn on the Food Network and just let it run all day long and just watch as many episodes of food shows as possible, or just listen to them while I'm cross-stitching. I don't care. I love food shows. Which means I also loved that we got to see behind the scenes of shooting a show like this, and we made it queer. Just, it's everything I needed, and I absolutely love this book. The chemistry was great, the steaminess was just absolutely wonderful, these characters really learning to get to know each other was great, these characters standing up for what they believe. There is so much to love about this story. If you want to hear me talk more about these books or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. Have you read any of these books, or now that I've talked about them, do you want to read any of these books? Let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!